Okay, yeah, I'll just start then, I guess. Since it's 1 o'clock. Yeah. um, okay. Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for having me. Because it's like a real treat to like have the opportunity to share some of my creative work. Um, and one that like I don't often get. So this is really nice. Um, so thanks for organizing this and um, yeah, so I thought I would just kind of maybe do like a bit of a whirlwind, like uh, tour through like a bunch of different things that are connected in different ways. But I'm using Celeste's strategy and sending a Dropbox folder. Um, oh, that's the wrong link actually. Wait, is that the right link? No, that's not the right link. How do I do this? Sorry. Um, okay. Cool. Okay. Okay. I think that's the right link. Um, so yeah, so the first thing I wanted to kind of share was basically this poetry form that my father invented called the Starling poetry form. Starling, like the bird. Um, so I'm going to take us all to his website, which I know he hasn't updated in many, many years. But the reason is that he has this really nice Starling, How to Read a Starling is the name of the Starling. So you see it's like this kind of 27 word matrix. And the poem is actually gives you directions on how to read it. So I'll read it. Look now here, how to read a Starling form. 3 by 3 fields of print in 27 words, starting from the top right corner and scrolling down. 3 by 3 fields of print in 27 words. Look now here, how to read a Starling form. So that's one possible way to read it. I mean, usually it starts from the top right. Kind of my preferred way of reading it is kind of like going down the columns and then coming back around. But I know he probably has some other ideas about how it could work. Anyway, I started writing these. Well, he started writing these, I guess, how many? Well, many years ago. I can't remember exactly. Maybe if you're there, you could type in and tell me. But I think it must be at least 10 years, but it's sort of like a daily practice for him. So he writes one every day. And at this point, there must be like thousands, if not tens of thousands of them. 10 years ago. Yeah, great. And so I started writing them sort of in earnest when I started grad school because like I'd always written a lot of like poetry and short stories and things. But when I got to grad school, I was like kind of, really needing to specialize. And so it was just like a nice way to keep being creative while also like taking a lot of courses and trying to prep for like more involved scholarly work. Um, so yeah, so I've also now written like probably hundreds of them. Um, and it's just like a really nice template to kind of like organize your thought and just be creative in a very small way. Um, so I wanted to show you a couple of Starlings that I wrote. Let me share. Yeah, here we go. So I had always thought like this would be a really nice way to sort of combine poetry with music because like the poetry form to begin with is already quite musical insofar as like with the organization of like 3x3 sort of cells of words, there's already a kind of meter like inbuilt into it, like I don't know if it's like 3/4 or whatever it is, but they're almost like I almost think of the cells as like measures or bars. Um, and so I think my dad's Starlings tend to be like much more like contained within the measure. Like it's like the 3 unit words are really like units. Whereas like I think I started experimenting more with like flowing over the bar lines, and also putting a lot of spaces in the matrix. So this one here that you see, uh, you can see there are like 3 missing words here and 2 missing words here. But visually, it like creates like a really nice thing. And then also rhythmically and metrically, it starts to change it up a little bit. So I'll just read this one. Certain bird, not a certain bird. Also not a not certain bird. This that certainly is neither this nor that certain bird. Also not a not certain bird. This certain bird, not a certain bird. Also not a not certain bird. This that certainly is neither this nor that certain bird. And then the next one in the series. Certain bird sings with sing-song certainty, any certain song that any bird sings, but any bird song sung with certainty sings uncertain, any certain song that any bird sings. And then I kind of, yeah, okay, so that's enough of that. So then I started kind of like thinking like, how to like turn this into music. And so, let's see. So basically I started playing a couple years ago with Kyle Motl, who some of you may have encountered. He graduated, I guess, 2 years ago. But he's a really phenomenal bass player and composer. And we started a group together called Treesearch. So we were like in Vermont one summer together, and I kind of like showed him these poems, and he started like playing a little bit, and I read over his playing, and then it was just like all improvising, and we never wrote it down, but eventually we got to like some kind of repeatable musical form that we still use now. So I'm gonna direct you now to the Dropbox folder. And please let me know if you have any questions or if anything's not working. But yeah, so check out the Dropbox folder and then click on Treesearch to Certain Bird. And let's just take 2.5 minutes to listen to this.
Certain bird, not a certain bird, also not a not certain bird, this that certainly is neither this nor that certain bird, also not a not certain bird, this certain bird, not a certain bird, also not a not certain bird, this that certainly is neither this nor that certain bird. Certain bird sings with sing-song certainty, any certain song that any bird sings. But any certain bird song, sung with certainty, sings uncertain any certain song that any bird would sing. Now, certain bird sings with sing-song certainty, any certain song that any bird sings, but certain bird sings with sing-song certainty, any uncertain song that any uncertain bird would sing. Now, if any bird song sung uncertain, sang certain bird song certainly, then The certain one stands its ground, even in flight. Odd bird, without flock and conspirator, always returning to roost steady as a flying thing can be.
Cool. So I hope nobody's still listening. But yeah, so that was what happened to those Starlings when we kind of made them musical. Let's see. Oh, hey, Matt.
Oh, hi.
So anyway, I wanted to give a little bit of context about Certain Bird. Certain Bird is actually a place. It's the name of a house in Vermont that I have spent the last maybe 4 summers going to. And it's run by this amazing dancer and just like amazing woman, Marta Miller. And she kind of opens up her place to a bunch of artists every summer. And the name of her house is Certain Bird. And I just think it's like such a great name. And I actually wrote those poems originally. I wrote them the first summer that I was there to like thank her for like hosting us. So it's cool that that's kind of had a life throughout like the rest of this work. So that's maybe a nice segue into talking about a piece that I sort of helped build at Certain Bird with a bunch of dancers and directed by a particular choreographer that I've worked with since 2016, Bobby Jean Smith. And we made this piece together called Lost Mountain, which basically it's about a ton of things, but a lot of I think what's in it is like the spirit of Certain Bird and like the spirit of kind of like communal listening and living and creating. And so I'm just going to play you the trailer for this piece because I think it's a really good trailer. Here we go. Oh, I thought a question. Where did the chat box go? Well, okay, I'll just play this trailer first and then come back. Oh no. Okay. Okay. Oops. Cool. So yeah, that's the trailer for Lost Mountain. Um, and um, hmm. Oh yeah, so I wanted to talk about this because basically, like when we were making this, there was like we got one day off because we had like 2 weeks to make it at Certain Bird, and there was like I was like begging Bobby to give us a day off because I was like really suffering because it was a lot of work. And so we got a day off, and I used the day off, and I wrote a bunch of Starlings, one for each character in the piece. So there were, I think, 10 characters and like people in the piece. Um, so these here they are. I actually only wrote 9 because I didn't write one for myself, but um, here's so this one I wanted to share. This one is the one that I wrote for Marta Miller, who is the owner of Certain Bird. So it goes, she walks her spirit on a leash so long, it's lost in mountain mist. So long, my love, it's lost in mountain mist. Um, so now I'm going to direct you again to the Dropbox folder, and maybe we can just take 2 minutes to listen to So Long, raw mix. And this is a song that I made with Treesearch, with Kyle Motl and the horn player and poet Nikolai Kuster, and Celeste is singing on this one. So let's just take a minute to listen to this.
She walks her spirit on a leash so long, it's lost in mountain mist. So long, my love, so long, it's lost in mountain Okay, I just sent the Dropbox link again in case
people are having trouble finding it. Oh, can you hear me? I just got a sign saying, okay, great. So yeah, that's a song on our next album that we recorded kind of right before quarantine. So we've been kind of like working remotely on that, like editing and mixing it over Zoom, which is like a nice excuse to see each other and chat a little bit. So I guess the next thing I'll play is from our last album, which was called No More Knowledge. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm just gonna play why don't we just listen to the title track, No More Knowledge, again in the Dropbox folder. Basically, the way this one kind of took form was that, so like Kyle and I didn't really start playing together until like we had kind of like heard each other play in other contexts for like several years. And I remember going to this like one solo show that Kyle did, where he was kind of doing an hour and a bit. Oh, am I still muted? Can you hear me? Oh, True US said I might be muted. Can you hear me? True US? Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, so he played this like hour-long set where he was just kind of improvising solo the whole time, and kind of like cycling through like a lot of different like musical zones based on like his different just like things that he's like innovated and discovered on the bass. And he got to this one passage where he played all these like harmonics, these plucked harmonics. And I remember like going to a party after that concert and being like, man, like we should do something with that, you know, like that's like such like a kind of beautiful like musical zone. Like I really want to like play something on top of it, or like with it. And so that was kind of like the impetus for this song coming into being. So yeah, let's take a minute and listen to No More Knowledge. Cool. So I hope everybody's finished. Let me know if not. I was hoping to play another track from that album, Halberd Hands, which is a track that Kyle composed, which is like more like metal. Like I feel like we have very different aesthetics. Like as you can probably tell based on what I've played today, I'm like a total sap. So I really like, like romantic kind of like melodic music. So like I feel like Kyle's aesthetic is like a really good counterbalance to that. So I'm sending a link to all of you to like the full album if you want to check it out, and hear like the diversity of stuff on there. So yeah, because I want to leave a lot of time for questions and like discussion. So I'm just going to show you one more thing, which is like a project in progress, because I think one of the things that's hardest to do in like creative and collaborative processes is actually just to like start and like get the ball rolling and like get people invested and like feeling like not insecure about sharing stuff and like feeling like there's like enough of a thread to hang on to like kind of do work. So I'm going to share this project that I'm working on with this group I'm in called Amok, the American Modern Opera Company. And basically I had this like idea because a lot of our instrumentalists weren't really playing together. Like I was playing a lot with dancers and like other people were playing with singers, but I was like, let's try and kind of pool our creative expertise and like make something together with the instrumentalists. And it's a challenge because like some of them are like very invested in like early music, like 17th and 18th century music, and then other of them are really new music specialists. So they're very different styles of playing. And also the instrumentation is very weird. Like we don't have a string quartet. We have like two cellos, violin, bass, like another violin, a flute. So it's just like a piano. So it's and percussion. So it's not. It doesn't lend itself easily to like an ensemble that you're used to seeing. So I was kind of thinking like, what could we do? What could unify these voices and instruments? So I came up with the idea of maybe we could play like canons and fugues, because there are so many canons and fugues like throughout history, and that are still being written in the present day. And like a lot of canons and fugues are like open instrumentation, like they don't require you to play a specific instrument. So we started like a canon fugue bank. So this is like, it's like a bank of all these different like canons that we've written or that people in the past have written. So like here are these like personal fantasias that we're recording together. So you see like this one's still incomplete. It just has like flute and violin, but so we're waiting for like people to like add more tracks. Here are like a couple of different canons that we've written. So like Doug Balliet, who's the bassist in Amok, wrote these canons. I've written a couple of canons that are, and like the point is like they're none of these things are like necessarily that good or like polished or finished. But the idea is that like it's a starting place, right? It's like pooling our collective like creative products and just like putting them like in a place and then seeing where they go. And one of the things I like about canons is that they're like they can be small, right? Like they can be here's, I have this like tiny little notebook, and like they're small enough that I can write them in the tiny notebook. And then like maybe let me see, I could write like a Starling, like underneath a cannon or something. And so like the idea being that like cannons, like Starlings, are these like forms for the creation that help you kind of create music or poetry. Like they're little like templates for just starting to build things in a very small way. Kind of like a bird's nest, where you don't kind of plan the whole vision. You don't architect the whole vision of the bird's nest. You kind of just start like putting twigs together. Well, you don't personally, the bird does, but like the bird starts putting the twigs together, and like there's not necessarily a master plan. There's just kind of like the additive effect of like all these little bits and pieces being thrown in, and then eventually like finding ways to like fit them together. So yeah, that's it. That's all I have prepared to present today. So, and I'd love to just like talk or like answer questions or, oh, actually there was one thing I wanted to say, which is, if any of you want to like try and write a Starling or like a cannon, like that would be very cool. And I would love to see them if you have any ideas, and you can put them in the Dropbox folder, so that maybe like all of you could see them as well. Or you can also like email me and be like, I don't really know what I'm doing. Like, and I'll like try and be helpful if I can. Just because like I find it's been like a really nice way to connect to other musicians during this time. So yeah, anyway, that's it for my presentation. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, any questions or comments or?
Yeah, no. If you don't mind, I'll begin. I think it's actually really interesting. Looking at the Starling form, and specifically, I think its true power was actually revealed when you set it to music, and it was really interesting to see. So maybe because we do have a little bit of time, maybe after all other questions are done, I'd like to listen to the was it Halberd Hands, and hear some of your feedback or what your process was on that one specifically, because you said it was different.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can do that after the questions kind of peter out. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question, and that comes from actually your description of Treesearch in your Instagram, like Treesearch_music. And it says music from trees, like nature/culture. And so I guess I was just wondering like what you meant from that and how sounds of nature inspire the music in your album.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that question. Music. Well, I guess music from trees is kind of like it's I guess it's kind of like riffing on the fact that violin and a bass are both made from trees, like they're both wood instruments. But also I think
literal.
Yeah, there's the extremely literal aspect of it, but then there's like I guess more metaphorical ideas of like Treesearch, like we're kind of like looking for our roots a little bit, like we come from very different musical backgrounds, and we're both like kind of part of the project is like both like researching our roots and also like researching our branches, like where are we coming from, where are we going a little bit, how do we meet each other in the air, in the ground. And then I think the nature culture bit is I think it's just trying to like remind us that like a lot of times we can think of culture as like totally unconnected to nature, you know, like um, but just trying to like kind of remind ourselves that like everything we do and everything we make is an extension of nature, I guess. Like as ourselves, like natural beings. Um, that it's kind of like our art is like nature revealing itself again to itself through us a little bit. And um, uh, yeah, I think that's also like I like that the Starling form is also it's named after a bird, so I think it's implicit in there too. Although the Starling form doesn't have its own Instagram account, so maybe we should start it.
Yeah, so I have a question.
Mhm.
So my question is, I guess a little bit because you didn't touch upon it, like your path to how you eventually began composing these forms of music, and if you could comment a little bit about what is your your training, and how did you end up going down this path to eventually completing an album, working on a new album.
Mhm.
I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So, well, yeah. So I studied classical violin since I was 5, and I also, I mean, like, I don't know. I hesitate to like say that I compose music because, like, I don't really compose like in the sense of uh, like I don't spend a lot of time writing notes down, um, which is why I really like working with other people um, because. Like with Kyle, for example, like we just kind of have we've been working and playing together long enough that we can and improvising together a lot as well. So we can kind of like improvise, find a zone that we like, and then try and repeat it, and then start building a structure out from there. And I think when a lot of times when we think about composing, we think about like somebody like in a room writing like a huge masterpiece. But yeah, I feel like we arrive at it more by like scribbling little things and like yeah, nesting. Um, anyway, back to your question. I I think I didn't really write a lot of well, I wrote a little bit of music through like high school and college, and I always wrote a lot of like text. I was just like always writing. My dad is English professor and poet, and so I would we would write a lot of stuff for each other, uh, and then I played a lot of music, uh, like at school with my family. And my brother plays cello, um, so I think it was just kind of always there a little bit, and yeah, and then I kind of like never really. I think I never really thought about like making it as a professional musician because like music was just kind of like something that was always around and I was always doing it. And I actually came to grad school to UCSD to study like musicology, not not composition or performance. So like that's kind of always been in a way my plan. Well, since coming to grad school was to be a scholar, um, but then like the environment here is like so creative. I mean, like there are like all these people making work, you know, making albums, making pieces, and it just kind of really encouraged me to also keep making stuff. And I started meeting people like Kyle, like Bobby, like Celeste, who I just have like really like integral like in our relationships and our friendships is like the fact that we make music and that we make it together. So, and we make it for each other as well, right? Like, and I think that's the way to keep, for me to keep making stuff, is that I know I'm making it for somebody. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so another question. So you tend to work in like collaborative works, I find, whether it be like music and poetry or music and dancing. And so what do you like about working with multiple art mediums, and what is the process like sort of marrying those two mediums together?
First of all, I really like the link poster on your wall. That's awesome. Uh, and second of all, the media together. I don't know. I guess I just in pure instrumental music, like there's something really cool to like explore. Just I feel like that motivates a lot of the Treesearch stuff, is just like the timbres of string instruments, and like kind of pushing the boundaries of that, and like melding, and like so I do really like just like purely instrumental music as well. But I guess sometimes I miss like verbal meaning and signification, like, um, and I think there's like, I don't think there's like necessarily a cut and dry boundary between music and poetry. I mean, like they both have like rhythm, they both have like meter, um, they both play on sound and inflection, and I mean, so yeah, I don't necessarily see them as separate things, and it feels like pretty natural for them to go together. So, and then dance is the same thing. I mean, when I started working with Bobby, I kept like thinking about like music history, actually, and like the history of violin music as like an instrument accompanying dance. Like in the 1600s, that was like the primary function of violin, was to accompany dance, and like all the dance masters were fiddlers as well as dancers. Um, so yeah, that it was just finding reasons for it to make sense for me to like be making this work with her. um, yeah. Uh, so, and also I studied literature in college as well. I didn't actually study music, um, so it felt natural to like just keep on doing that. So, um, yeah.
Thank you.
So, well, I can give another minute in case anybody is still forming a question. Okay. Alda says, "Are there any dream projects you have at the moment?" Um, uh, no, actually, I kind of. Well, I mean, actually, I mean, I think this. I think I have like all the time. I have like a lot of ideas for things, um, but I feel like I've started to get better at realizing what's like realistic and unrealistic. So like the Canon bank that I showed you was like me trying to be as realistic as I could about probably like some kind of dream that I had like for something, but that dream is like the thing is like I feel like if the dream takes shape too quickly, then it can limit everybody who's like working on the thing together, right? So just kind of taking it step by step, I found is like maybe a better strategy. Yeah. I hope that answers the question. Oh, unrealistic projects. What about unrealistic projects? Well, there was like I wrote this like music, this kind of like musical called Enlightenment that like I wanted to stage for like several singers and an orchestra and stuff, but that was kind of like my dream project, and it was totally unrealistic, and it's yeah. So maybe that'll happen sometime. I don't know. Yeah.
What is the musical about?
The music is about well, I based it on like Adorno and Horkheimer's The Dialectic of Enlightenment, which is this like major, sort of like major 20th century philosophical text about like society and stuff. Well, we read Adorno in class. Right? He was the one that everybody really hated. Exactly. Uh, so I'm not actually sure like it would be a good idea. I don't think it would have much popular appeal actually, and that's also why like I don't compose projects all by myself, because like I know I don't have a very good radar for uh, like the tastes of most people. So yeah, favorite violin piece. Um, I've been playing the Bach C major fugue a lot from the C major sonata. That's kind of probably my favorite violin piece right now. Yeah, I just love how like grueling it is. Not Zigeunerweisen, no, definitely not Zigeunerweisen. Although I have played Zigeunerweisen, believe it or not. Not especially well, but favorite composer. Um, favorite composer. Celeste. It's my favorite composer. Can you talk? Okay. Can you talk about composing the solo part and the loose affiliation? So, a loose affiliation of Alleluias is the concerto that Celeste wrote for the Holy Symphony, which I think, well, yeah, she presented on it last week. But yeah, it was because it was mostly improvised. I guess you could say I kind of composed the cello part. Yeah, basically there were like different zones. Like when I was kind of coming off of, so Celeste wrote this sort of like 3-part counterpoint thing for me that it was like a refrain that I played several times throughout. And when I was coming off of that, I would just kind of play across those different voices and kind of like follow them sort of improvisationally. And then for like the more, like the further I got away from that, I would just kind of start playing like more gesturally, like kind of phrases, like sighing phrases, or like thinking in terms of like different patterns of interval sequences, and just like overall like emphasizing like the affect and gesture of it more than like, you know, really worrying too much about which notes I was choosing, but still like trying to like stay within things that sounded good with the orchestra. So like occasionally I would hear like I knew this flute, the piccolo came in here, so I would start doing this like kind of like high harmonic thing that I thought worked well with the piccolo, and then when the piccolo disappeared, I would return to like the more gestural, romantic, expressive sound. Yeah. And then there was like a kind of overall kind of ebb and flow within the form, where like I knew where like the high points were, like where I was supposed to linger. There's a kind of dramatic or narrative, large scale form that I would follow, on top of like knowing the more local passages and what kind of sounds would go well with them. So it's kind of like interpreting, in a way, like interpreting like a big concerto, like the Brahms concerto or something. You identify like where the exposition is, where the development is, where the recapitulation starts, and you know where like all the different themes, like you know where the first and second themes are, and then you make interpretive decisions about like where you really go all out, or where you hold back, or where you play more expressively based on the structure of that. So it was basically like that, except I was also making up the notes. So, somebody had asked about, if you have more questions, just type them in and I'll answer them. But Isaac had asked about halberd hands. So that's one that Kyle wrote. He actually wrote a lot of stuff down for that. He wrote down like 3 different lines of like 2 parts. And so he brought them in to like a rehearsal, and we played through them and just kind of like practiced them and drilled them with a metronome. And then we started like improvising off of them. So, and we would, we would come up with ideas like maybe you keep playing the bass line and I'll play over it for a bit, and then you like get away from the bass line, and then we're just freely improvising for a bit, and then we come to this cadence, and then we'll start the next line that you composed. So through that process of like rehearsing it, we found like the form for it. So yeah, that's how that worked. What am I writing my dissertation on? I'm writing, so okay. Basically, I'm writing it on like a history of different violinists who are also like music theorists and composers, and like some of them, like Galeazzi is one of them. He was like also a mathematician, a botanist, and like so these violinists who had like very like exploratory practices, both as like researchers and musicians, and kind of like tracing sort of like history of like how modern violin pedagogy and practice has taken shape through these different figures in their writings. But it also makes a couple of points of like, when we think of like music history, we oftentimes think of like the general like aesthetics of music taking form because of like composers and theorists. Like it's like the composers who like set up atonality, or who set up like impressionism. But like one of the points I'm trying to make in my dissertation is that it's actually as much the performers who drove those aesthetic shifts and changes through the centuries, because they were like the primary engines for like actually like making the music in sounding form. And a lot of the composers were like taking bits and pieces like from their writings, and their like inventions, and their compositions in order to like put into their compositions. So like I'm just trying to show that there's like this back and forth cycle. And so Gabby also asked, does it influence my playing composition? Absolutely, it does. Like for the process I was just describing, for example, like it was the fact that like Kyle didn't just write the stuff and then like dictate how we should play it. It was like he brought it in, and then a lot of the form took place by us just like playing through it and like feeling what it felt like in our bodies on our instruments, like what the sounds were, and that was as much sort of like creative engine for like the piece taking form as like writing the notes down on a piece of paper. So yeah, I think it's definitely in there. Yeah. So I guess we have time for one more question, maybe. Okay, time's up. Okay, do other people ever play your compositions? Um, once there was like well, in college I like wrote, I was in a jazz composition class, and like they hired a bunch of jazz musicians and they played one of my compositions, but I think that's the only time. Um, yeah, it's a pretty personal practice. So uh, yeah, is that a bar 412? I don't know what you're looking at, but it sounds interesting. So um, cool.
Okay, yeah, so we're at the 2 p.m. mark, and so we're done. Thank you. If anyone has any questions, just drop them in the chat. We can like linger for a couple minutes, but other than that, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. It's really
Yeah,
fun.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah. I hope you all enjoy your weekends. Get away from your computers. Okay.